Yeah, definitely. Honestly, that's my goal. I want to see if I can hit 100 this year. I did 2 years ago, but after my collarbone, just working and becoming an adult, wasn't able to do that. So hopefully this year I'll have the freedom to, because that'd be sick. At least like some half days in there. But you kind of mentioned fear earlier, so I do kind of want to talk about that. Like, obviously, it's a massive thing for a lot of people. I'm sure we touched on it on the last podcast too, but you kind of said like testing your body both on snow and off snow was a way to reduce your fear. So do you kind of want to discuss that for maybe other people that are dealing with fear or afraid of trying things for the fear of injury or just whatever it may be?
Yeah, of course. And for me, there's I've had so much struggle with fear that I've figured out a couple different methods for me to minimize that. And one that has really helped me, especially in this situation, is putting in the work.
Mhm.
Trusting the fact that my body is healed and that my body is strong, and no matter what I put at it, I'm gonna be okay, relatively
Mhm.
speaking. And so it's like I just put a lot of emphasis on putting in the work and trusting that. So the moment that I get on snow, my body and mind are connected in terms of I've put in the work. That's been like a big deal. And then the second big thing is just not allowing it to be an option. The more I contemplate, the more I process, the more I think about stuff, the more I build the fear up in my head. Let's say I'm gonna hit a jump or a cliff. If I spend all day thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it, and scoping it out and riding by it and just trying to perfectly analyze everything that's going on with that jump or cliff, all of a sudden that cliff is at least 10,000 times bigger versus I trust my skill. I know how to put my body in the right body position. I know how to handle it. I know how to adjust and adapt. Let's just do it. Get it out of the way. And one of my biggest fears in snowboarding is really, really big jumps. They terrify me. And
Same.
it's not fun at all because I go hit a medium-sized jump I'll hit it switch, I'll do it one-footed, absolutely no problems. And then I go over to the large line and jump one is fine. Jump two is fine, but it's always the third one. And I build it up into my head. And every year I have to battle that fear of just, oh, it's the third jump. And most times it's like not that bad, but I build it up. So it's just trying to minimize my mind going down that path. And that's
Mhm.
really what I put my focus on with my hip injury.
Yeah, and I think just knowing, like, your skill level, like, being very cognizant into, like, where you are, like, obviously, you know what you've done, you know what you can do in your sleep, and you know what things are a little bit more difficult and etcetera. Like, you've been snowboarding for forever, and so you, like, you know you can hit that big jump line, but you're, like, in your head about it, right?
Yep.
Whereas, like, someone else, like me, for example, I'd be like, "Okay, I know I can hit that rail, but I'm super in my head about it," because the idea of eating it on that rail trumps the fact that I know I can do it. And so I think what's really important for people is knowing and really figuring out like, am I actually capable of doing that? Or is it scary because in the back of my mind, I'm like, maybe this is too big for me, or maybe my skills are not quite there for this. And like being able to decipher the two, I think is a really big way to kind of get rid of fear because if you know you're like, I can do this, realistically, I can do this, then you can kind of be like, okay, get out of my head, just get it done. Whereas you don't and you don't put yourself in a situation where, like, you could get hurt because it is too much for you.
I find a lot of people are on one side or the other of this like spectrum. Your skills are here, but you limit what you really do because you're scared and nervous. Or
Mhm,
your skills are way down here, yet you're an absolute sender, but what you're trying to do, what you're attempting is not balanced with your actual skill set. So for me, I understand where my skill set is, and I know exactly where that level of risk or consequences is. Well, then I just want to make sure there's a balance, or my skill set is higher. And the longer you're in the sport, the more you can evaluate that. And I see it all the time. Specifically, I ride copper all the time, and there's a large jump line and a medium jump line. And you get people who just show up on the large line, and they may ask me, "Hey, how many brake checks are into the jump?" Well, to me, brake checks is an indication that you might not be as advanced of a snowboarder because you technically we call it speed checks. So your vocabulary might actually be a little bit off. And this is a true story. I've seen this happen. And then, I evaluate, like, hey, have you ever hit those jumps? And they're like, no, I was going to hit these. But there's no understanding of the difference of skill set that is required, or the distance, or the consequence and risk. So really trying to find that balance. And then I work with a lot of competitive athletes historically. And our goal, and my goal in my coaching philosophy is, if we're going to attempt this trick, you should land it within 3 tries. That means you have the skills to be able to land it within 3 tries. And most times I develop their skills so they land it first try. I've had a kid do double backflip first try. He did double back 10 first try because he's set up for it. But it's not that we've just been holding him back so long, but he has every skill and he's proven to me. So real quick, an example would be double back 10 is where you go, you do a 1080 and you flip inverted twice. Okay, cool. Go prove that in Woodward, which at Copper, big shout out to Copper. It's a jump into a foam pit. Go prove to me you can do it.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's go take it to a real jump, the real world, because you've proven to me you're ready. And I do that in my own snowboarding. I'm going to go try this trick. Okay, how do I prove to myself that I'm ready? If I know I'm ready and I have this skill and I can land it relatively soon, then I'm not scared. I'm confident. But if I'm like, feel like I'm super far off, what skills do I need? So it's a very simple but logical approach to how I snowboard is skill development.
hmm Yeah, and I think that's really key. Skill development on snow, skill development off snow, whatever you choose to do, I think is like one of the most important things. And just like being in tune with your body and your skill level. Like so many people are terrified to do something. And yeah, like you said, it can be either one of the spectrum, or you could have that in between and still be scared. But it's knowing what you're capable of, what your body's capable of, and just honestly sending it at that point if you know it's something that you're capable of and you know that it's something that you can accomplish, like you said, within a few tries. But I think having that knowledge of what you can do and what you can't do, and like if it's a trick specifically, like truly understanding that trick, the mechanics of the trick and all of that is going to just make a huge difference in like your fear. You're always going to be scared, you're always going to be nervous that first try, but then once you kind of try it and you're like, okay, that wasn't that bad, then that fear normally kind of goes down, then you can really like stop blacking out and actually like get into the trick.
Yeah, and that's a very good point that you brought up. At some point, you got to do it. You got to go for it. You can prove to me, your coach, your peers, whoever it is, 1,000 times, but at some point, got to rip the Band-Aid off and you got to do it. But our goal is to minimize the risk and minimize the consequences in that situation. And that's where I've enjoyed coaching, and my coaching philosophy just comes is highly influenced from the amount of injuries that I've had. And at the end of the day, if we can develop more skills, reduce injuries, you give the athletes a better chance of success. But to our most common snowboarder, the weekend warrior, you just want to have fun, but I don't want to be injured all the time, or I don't want to be in the hospital all the time, or I got to go work tomorrow, or I have kids to feed, whatever it is. So there's still the same, the principles apply the same. Develop your skill and make sure you're ready for whatever that next thing is. And I feel when I make YouTube content and I do those step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 style videos do really well, because you can progress your way from not really knowing what a carve is to being able to actually carve in these super simple steps. And then it just minimizes the risk, minimizes the fear, but then you also feel very accomplished. So definitely think that approach, whether you're trying to go for a gnarly trick and be a competitive Olympic athlete, or you just want to have fun, taking just a logical, progressive thought process just helps you stay on your feet.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the biggest thing. And unfortunately, like people are just, they get in their head. I'm so common, or I'm so guilty of this. It's just getting in your head, being like, fear is going to overrule me for the day. And there's so many times where people are like, I want to do this. but fear is just the too much. Like my biggest setback in snowboarding is fear. The reason I can't progress is fear or whatever. I feel like that's like the most common thing that I get told. And I feel like I've seen on your post as well, is like that's like the most common uh comment. It's just like, yeah, this is cool, but I'll never try this because I'm terrified. And I think like that's fair to an extent. But then I also think that once you know that you are ready for something like that, or even not like some hypothetical trick that's super crazy, but just like you know you're ready to take the next step and you should be progressing. You've been snowboarding for a long time and you've been stuck in this like realm of I can't get better. Like that's when you need to basically reevaluate why you can't get better. Is it fear? Is it body mechanics? Is it skill? Or are you just holding yourself back at that point?
Yeah. And to add to that, I'm going to generalize fear. And obviously, this is not applicable to everyone, but what you're attempting versus your preparedness is not equal. So if I'm going to go hit this gnarly rail, but I feel like I'm going to die on the way in, obviously that's terrifying. And then when you're in a fear-based state, your muscles, your body react completely different, therefore creating an additional roadblock to how to that outcome. So if we could relax, feel prepared, it's like me going in my car and going 4 miles an hour. I'm not really scared of that because I know that, you know, I have the skill, blah, blah, blah. I've been doing this forever. But me going into a NASCAR or an F1 car driving 200 miles an hour, I'm going to be extremely fearful until I've developed the confidence and the preparation, the skill to get there. Then it's just got to be proportional. And I believe what most people are lacking, as I was as well, is the fundamental skills and the amount of times you've been successful gives you that confidence and gives you that mindset that I'm going to be okay. And I minimize the fear. Again, if I'm hitting a 100-foot cliff is a different fear than a 5-foot cliff. But to some people, they've hit a 100-foot cliff 100,000 times. It's just a walk in the park.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our goal, or my goal for people, is just to be prepared and feel good and have that ability.
Mm-hmm.
But it goes back to the logical progression. I am terrified to do this. Okay, what are the 5 ways or 5 steps that I need to get there to not be scared? And by the time I'm there, it's not even a big deal anymore. And that's where I would love to even see your riding go. And Kaylie went to summer camp with me. If you didn't catch that on Ep1, she's doing tame dogs off of this freaking gnarly little jump and sending it to the bottom. But we didn't just say, Kaylie, send it. That's not my coaching style. What were the steps that we took to get you to be prepared to just give it your first attempt? Do you remember?
Yeah, so the main thing was obviously at Mount Hood, we have access to an airbag, which not everyone does. So if your goal is to go inverted for the first time, like definitely find a patch of powder if you don't have access to an airbag or a trampoline or something. Like do it in a less challenging situation first. But yeah, we went to an airbag and like I've been inverted before, just not on the snowboard. Like I have flipping skills, but the idea of flipping sideways to me has always been weird because I like was just trained, you know, front flip, back flip, like gymnastic style stuff.
Yeah.
And so going sideways has just always been like an idea to me that I was like, I can't do that. That doesn't make any sense in my mind. So we took it to the airbag and immediately right off the bat, like obviously you can't really land in an airbag, you slip out, but it felt like I landed it. And so I was like, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. And like I was literally like pounding my chest, like going up to it the first time to try and do an airbag. I was like, I'm gonna die right now. Like I'm terrified. And once I did it that one time, I was like, oh, cool. And like that fears immediately went away once I did it the one time. And it's because I knew I could flip. I knew I wasn't going to die going into an airbag. And I knew what I had to do. It's basically a cartwheel. I tuck and I try and land. And I try and spot my landing. Like that's what it was. So it's like, okay, you break it down from this, 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 and this. You take it into a scenario where you're not going to die. And then you try it that one time. And you're like, okay, that's not that scary. So I did it like 4 or 5 times in the airbag. Seemed like I was landing as much as you can in an airbag. So you're like, cool, guess we're just gonna go take it to the snow and see what happens. Same thing, got to the snow, was like my heart was pounding out of my chest, but I was like, okay, I did it. I'm not gonna die. Like I know what I have to do. So the very first time I tried it on the jump was absolutely terrifying, but I didn't die. I didn't land it, but I didn't die. So I was like, okay, we're gonna try it again. Never actually landed it, mainly because I'm really good at getting in my head, but, I do now know why I was doing it wrong. I have a bunch of videos of me doing it wrong, so I can break those down and be like, "You should practice this, this, and this, find a patch of powder again, try it again now that it'll be a new season, haven't done it in a while, and then hopefully land it."
And I love that you talked about just that progression. And at some point, you got to rip the Band-Aid off and go. At the same time, you did it in such a safe environment to minimize the consequences.
Yeah,
And that is just a testament to why coaching slash these opportunities is so valuable, because you can progress quickly, but it's in as safe as possible. And there's always going to be some kind of risk, but just trying to minimize that risk and taking the steps. It's not just go huck and hope. It's not a viable option.
yeah. Yeah, and I think, like, for me personally, and I know that this is not gonna work for everyone, but this is why I started Snow Functional in the first place, is because, like, fear was so big, and especially after I hurt myself, like, that fear was insane for me. Like, when I first started snowboarding, I was dumb and, like, did a bunch of dumb stuff, and so I was like, "Okay," I was constantly hurting myself, but it was never a real injury, and so in my mind, I was like, "Whatever, I'm not gonna actually get hurt, it never happened before," type of thing. Like, yeah, I'd have bruises, probably concussed myself multiple times, but
Whoops.
I was like, "Oh, it's fine." And so I would never really progress. I was never really getting what I wanted. And then eventually, when I did hurt myself, I was like, wow, my body's really not capable of this. And there's massive like risk to it. Like, I finally, it clicked in my head. I was like, there's actual like risk to what I'm doing. And so when I started taking it back and being like, okay, what is my body actually capable of? And what can I achieve off the snow? Like, okay, I don't have the mechanics to do this, or this is really difficult, or this hurts, or whatever it may be. I'm really unstable here. Then it's like, okay, that I know that in my head that I need to work on that. So why would I try and attempt something that requires that of me in a scarier situation on snow with a board strapped to me when I know I can't even do it without that? So like just having that knowledge and being able to see myself progress off the snow made it so much easier to progress on the snow, because I was like, okay, my body is capable of that. And on top of that, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And I had like, I ride with friends. So like having a friend that's better than me and be like, look, I can do it. It's not that scary. I know you can do it. And then you just try it the one time, you're like, okay, now the fear's gone. Like the fear is always going to be there when you're trying something new. But when you have it in the back of your mind of like, okay, I should be able to do this, let me just get it over with, it just makes it so much easier to progress after you get that one like done with.
And that's cool that you just said that the fear is always going to be there. And I completely agree. If you don't know Chris Corning, he's a gnarly snowboarder. Dude's doing 1800s and more. And I did a little YouTube video with him. And that dude's a gnarly top of the line dude who's trying to squeeze out 1% more out of whatever trick he's doing. That dude has fear. But the threshold that it's at is way up here compared to where maybe I am or some other people are. So it's like fear is always a thing, but can we push that threshold as high as possible? And that's a very fun way to snowboard, because I've instructed and coached for 15 years. And I have people who have never snowboarded in their life go snowboard and they're like, this is the most fun thing I've ever done. And to me, I can't comprehend that because there's so much more out there. Now imagine you're a better snowboarder and you can go ride double black diamonds, go do a 360 on moguls and just have fun. Because
Mm-hmm.
you're better and you have more skill set, it's more fun. So like stoked on those dudes who are sliding sideways, heel side hero, having the best day of their life. But there's so much more. So if you're better at something, it opens up the opportunities for more tricks, more exploration, more travel. There's so much more out there when you do have those skills. And that's where I put so much effort and emphasis on body position, biomechanic, the mechanics of snowboarding, so that you have this foundation that applies to as many things as possible, so that you just love snowboarding and you can progress and be involved and stay in the industry. What I don't want to have people do is just go snowboard and catch edges all day and hate it and go play Fortnite or something else. And I play video games, but I want people to snowboard and
Yeah,
stay snowboarding.
definitely. I know. Stay snowboarding. I mean, there's a lot of people. I get comments all the time from people. being like, I'm older and I'm just learning this year. This is like my second, third year, and I need tips so that I don't die and I don't get hurt. I'm like, yes, like I want you to enjoy this, even though you're being like you are older or whatever, and you're inevitably more at risk for injury, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it if you're taking the right steps and you are learning the basics and the foundation so that you can actually progress to where you want to go. That doesn't mean you have to go throw 10, but if your goal is to be able to do like a flat 360 and like the idea of catching an edge doing that is absolutely terrifying to you, then there you go. Like now you can learn the mechanics of where your pressure should be on your edge so that you don't do that.
Yeah. And we talked about it a little bit last time on the last previous episode, but having the ability to do anything you want on a snowboard is so cool. And then I was going to do this video, and I'm going to do this video where it's like, if I were to start snowboarding all over, how would I progress as quick as possible? And what would be the steps? And I think that would be really fun for new and beginner snowboarders to have like a blueprint of what is a fast, progressive, safe way to do it. And there's definitely a lot of things that I would do differently having the information I have now. So that's one video I would like to create in hopes to help just more people.
Yeah, and I like to say this all the time. I'm sure I mentioned it in the last episode too. Is like one, I would love to see that video because I know I'd benefit from it also. Because I genuinely feel like I'm trying to start at like square one again. Like obviously I know how to snowboard, I know how to carve, but I picked up so many bad habits when I started that I almost feel like those first 3 years are kind of like meaningless to me at this point because I really didn't learn anything that helped me. I just ended up getting stuck and getting hurt, and the mechanics that I rode with caused me to get stuck. And so, yeah, like obviously I learned stuff during them, but I progressed more in 16 days this last season than I ever did riding with better mechanics, better strength, better pop, better stability, all those types of things that I'm kind of like, okay, let me kind of start at square one and start this progression all over to get where I actually want to be because I wasn't making those steps. I wasn't hitting those goals back in my first 3 years of snowboarding.
And you don't know what you don't know. And then when you've been in it for a long time, then yeah, you look back at it and see, oh, here's my inefficiencies. But that's also the best part about snowboarding. And there's always some place to go, somewhere to improve. And that is, yeah, just clearing up and cleaning up the fundamentals just makes such a big impact. And that's as a coach or a snowboarder, how can I make the biggest impact with the least amount of work? That's a pretty big deal. And when it comes down to better body positions and biomechanic, uh, being in a more biomechanically optimized position, you're just giving yourself a better chance for success. And we talked about it last time with, what style means and all that, but just giving ourselves like a nice foundation and then take it wherever you want. That's a big deal. And the rest of the video is going to be linked down below. We have over an hour and a half of this podcast and 2 hours for the episode before. So go ahead and check that out down below.